Good morning, members of the Board of GE. I am Noah Shepherdson, the Mayor of Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and today I'm joined by City Councilman Christopher Efting, Graydon Hewitt, and Ethan Hensley to present to you guys about the environmental crisis of the Housatonic River and GE's role in this situation. So at the beginning of GE and Pittsfield's relationship, it was a very mutually beneficial, symbiotic relationship. For GE employed about 13,000 out of 50,000 people in the city of Pittsfield, which obviously is very mutually beneficial. For GE was able to garner a very large workforce out of the city, and also Pittsfield's economy was very positively impacted. There was many civilians and citizens of Pittsfield working for GE and was paying higher taxes, and thus paying through taxes to improve schools and improve roads and improve all sorts of other public domain works. And then this was a really great relationship for about 4 decades, about 40 years, until about the 1979 ban that Congress enacted on PCBs, which are a chemical. They're known as polychlorinated biphenyls in the scientific world, that most factories had been using prior to the ban, they're also highly carcinogenic. And prior to the 1979 ban, there's no real inclination that companies particularly knew that they're carcinogenic, and so we do not blame the old board of GE for partaking in this. However, in the 1980s, GE was ordered by the EPA to conduct some research about the levels of PCB, polychlorinated biphenyls, in the Housatonic River and areas surrounding that it had been expelling from their plastics division factory in Pittsfield, Mass. And it was a third-party team, which means that it was not a government-sanctioned team, nor was it GE's own team. There was just an independent third party that GE had to pay to conduct the research. It was mandated by the EPA, though. And the results of this research eventually resulted in a mandate that GE, in the 1990s, that GE was indeed responsible for cleaning up the area for the levels of PCBs were highly harmful to human health, just due to their carcinogenic nature. And then in 2018, the current board of GE appealed the mandate that the EPA had given to clean up the Housatonic River, and a main part of this mandate was the transportation of toxic materials such as contaminated soil out of state to 3 formerly disclosed, already operational EPA sanctioned waste disposal spots. What you guys have suggested is that instead of removing the PCBs out of state, is you create 3 new toxic waste zones around the area, around Western Mass, in order to put the PCBs there and to cut costs. And we feel as though the original mandate is definitely a better way to go with this. So Pittsfield did also, there's a second prong to this argument, is that Pittsfield also faced a severe economic downturn after the departure of GE. Right now, Pittsfield is full of old factory buildings that are a hotspot for criminal activities such as drug deals and gang violence. Just because of the sheer size and the sheer presence GE had in Pittsfield, there's a lot of empty buildings that still haven't been reinvigorated into the economy or into the social space in Pittsfield. Also, the poverty levels have spiked in proximity to the old GE buildings based on a census that was done very recently. And what this means is that this also contributes to the gang violence and also the drug crimes in the area. For when there's less money, people have to turn to extreme measures in order to get by. This is what PCBs look like. They're a highly carcinogenic material, and they were widely used throughout factories prior to the 1979 congressional ban on them. And we don't blame GE for using them. For at the time, it was common practice, and most other companies were doing this too. However, we do feel that it was a very big misjudgment on the behalf of the old board of GE to believe that it was okay to dump something that looked so toxic as this, for lack of better words, into a river that was used by the public. So this is the area that was affected broadly by GE's pollution of the Housatonic River. So this area up here, it runs from about mid of Western Mass through Connecticut. And there's an elementary school. This is where the GE plant used to be. And this is the area that was most severely affected in Pittsfield, was this half-mile and mile reach between Allen Elementary School and Pittsfield High School, which are up here, which are 2 local public schools. And I know for a fact that the local track team runs around Silver Lake very regularly, and therefore they're exposed to certain materials that may still be lingering in the area, and the area has also struggled to gain people to come there because of the devastation left behind by pollution. And also, GE has done a wonderful job restoring the Silver Lake area, though. However, this is what it looked like before the removal of PCBs, and this is what it looked like after. GE created had about a half-mile walkway around the lake, and they put down nice benches in areas like that, and just made the area look much better. And especially since this is in a very impoverished part of the town, part of the city. And they also did a great job putting up warning signs saying "Do not eat fish" because they're contaminated with PCBs, and that can contribute to carcinogenic properties in humans. However, it does not. We feel as though the signs don't do justice to the issue, for it doesn't prevent people with no prior knowledge or no knowledge of scientific words such as polychlorinated biphenyls or carcinogenic, such as little girls like this and other children, from entering the area and potentially being exposed to such harmful chemicals that might have dire consequences later on in their lives. So there are three main legal aspects of this case, which are the research, the mandate, and the appeal. So the research I went into a little bit of depth before. It was the EPA. Initially, before they mandated that GE cleanup, they just fund a third party to do some research on the general levels of contamination, PCBs, in the soil, the fish, and the other local wildlife. And the result of this mandate, or the result of the research, eventually led to the mandate, which was given in the 1990s by EPA to GE, 1999 to be exact, in which GE was ordered to clean up the areas affected by their pollution of the Housatonic River. And then this was working well, and this also was a part of the fact where the EPA said that GE should transport the PCBs out of state into the three formally disclosed EPA locations. However, the appeal, which was given in January of 2018, so quite recent, by your current board. So it's a different board that was dealing with the research and mandate, and that was your board dealing with the appeal. And we feel as though the original mandate was sufficient, and that definitely GE should feel obligated to uphold their part that the EPA has already determined that they should play in the cleaning up of the Housatonic River, and that they should definitely drop the appeal against transporting the material out of state. For it doesn't make sense to take out PCBs of a river and then dump it literally right next to it in three new locations in the city.
Hi, I'm Braden, a fellow councilman of Pittsfield, and I'm going to be addressing some of the financial impacts of GE's pollution of the Housatonic River. Following some of the history, there are some financial complications that are involved with GE's pollution of the Housatonic River. However, I want to start by first providing a little bit of perspective. This is GE stock price over the past year, which has slowly been falling, and looking at the company's statement of cash flows over the past 3 years, investment or cash that has gone to investment has been declining drastically over the past 3 years. What this means is that now would be a perfect time to provide a spark to reinvigorate and potentially reinvest, potentially by issuing some kind of debt or tightening the budget a little bit to perform some kind of investment that would provide a spark for GE. Looking at some of the financial impacts of the legal aspects, like Noah, the mayor, was saying, PCBs were legal for use while GE was functional in Pittsfield. PCBs were very versatile because they were really useful for managing heat, and thus were really useful for energy sources and capacitors and transformers. Looking into some of the financial impacts of the legal issues, GE has put in approximately $500 million into cleanup since the 1990s. Following the 1999 mandate, about $250 million deal was put together. About 200 of that went into cleanup, and 50 went into economic redevelopment following the loss of jobs and GE shutting down the factory. Looking into some of the ethical issues, the EPA has recently brought forth a $613 million plan over 13 years that requires GE to further invest in the cleanup of the Housatonic River. The company has cleaned up a certain portion, however, the EPA has wanted to expand on this. The main point of this discrepancy in this deal is where GE should choose to dispose of the soil that might have PCBs in it. The EPA has suggested that the company ship the soil out of state. However, GE wants to dispose of the soil within 3 locations that are nearby. The difference between the two is about $250 million out of the $613 million. Now, providing some perspective on this deal, GE has put in about $200 million in 2017 towards cleaning up the Housatonic River. And whether or not GE chooses to dispose of the soil in or out of state chips in a lot into the $613 million and chips a lot into some of the money that GE has invested in environmental remediation. Looking at some of the financial considerations, if GE were to come back, because Pittsfield is outside of Boston, you don't have to deal with some of the real estate costs of being directly in Boston. The location is also ideal because it's equidistant from Boston and New York City as well. To continue, GE was really inefficient by choosing to just leave and leaving all the factories that they had functioning. So not only would GE be more efficient by returning to the factories that they had built, they would also rejuvenate the economy that they had left alongside the 13,000 jobs that they provided. I would now like to turn it over to my fellow Councilman Chris, who will talk about some of the ethical issues in this case.
Hello, my name is Chris, a fellow councilman of Pittsfield, and I will be responsible for the ethical portion of this presentation. So the ethical factors regarding GE's pollution of the Housatonic River is split into 2 different categories. You have the environmental issue of the PCBs and also the economic issue and the effect that GE moving from Pittsfield had on Pittsfield economy. So in terms of the environment, the former management of GE was dumping PCBs into the Housatonic River, and this destroys the ecosystem, disrupts the food chain, and causes an increase in potential risk of cancer in both animals and humans. In terms of the economy, General Electric moved its plastics division from Pittsfield to Boston, and that caused a tremendous job loss within the Pittsfield area. Just to give some statistics regarding the situation, in terms of the environment, the EPA estimates that there's nearly 100,000 to 600,000 pounds of PCBs present in the river sediment and floodplain soil of Pittsfield and the Housatonic River. In 1979, from the research conducted that NOAA spoke of, the PCB level in brown trout was averaged around 16.5 parts per million. And just to give some background, the FDA limit for PCBs in fish is 2 parts per million, so that's over 8 times more concentrated than is safe for consumption, so this is a serious issue. Also, the PCBs that were polluted in the river, they traveled all the way to Connecticut, which is a distance of over 140 miles, and that just shows kind of how big the situation is. In terms of the economy, GE laid off over 4,000 people in just the 80s and the 90s alone. And there's also 52 acres of old factory buildings present in the Pittsfield area, which makes the area less appealing to new people who would want to move or work in Pittsfield. GE's actions are not ethically defensible, even though it was legal to dump these PCBs into the river. The fact that other people were polluting rivers at the time as well, and the fact that it was legal, does not make it okay to make the obvious unethical decision of putting these carcinogenic materials into the river. Also, GE is currently fighting against shipping the PCBs out of state. They want to keep them in state, and their mission statement is to cure the world, and them refusing to clean up their own mess is a serious issue and goes against their mission statement. Lastly, the Housatonic River is a public natural resource that should be available to all citizens of Pittsfield, and GE has seriously polluted that and caused an issue in the area that they are refusing to clean up fully. However, one thing that GE has done has been positive lately is in respect to the eco-imagination. These are an innovative line of products designed to reduce pollution globally, and just to give some examples, they have invented locomotives and plane engines that emit less pollution, and what this does is it reduces pollution worldwide, and it shows that GE cares about reducing pollution on the global level. And what this does for the company is it increases their sustainability, and it gives them an increased public image. And we're going to use eco-imagination in our solution, and I'm going to hand it over to Ethan Hensley to propose our solution.
Thank you, Chris. So hello everybody, my name's Ethan. I'm another council member of Pittsfield, and I'll be responsible for our solution. So our solution at its core is to revitalize the relationship that we, Pittsfield, had with UGE for a long period of time. So for decades, we provided you with an area that supported your business and was a great area for you guys to operate. And in return, you guys provided the local area and the company in Pittsfield with a plethora of jobs, and we really want to bring that back. However, there's a couple of things that need to happen before this can really take place. First, you guys need to drop the appeal against the EPA mandate. This would cause you guys to continue to allocate resources to cleaning up the Housatonic as well as maintaining it. And the 3 waste dumps that you guys want to take the waste currently and take it out of state. So although this has a potential for high financial costs, I'll talk a little bit about later how this can be mutually beneficial for not only Pittsfield but also for UGE. Also too, we believe that you guys should rebuild through eco-imagination. So as previously mentioned by Chris, eco-imagination is the environmental sustainability and protection branch of GE, and they focus on building and developing products that try to reduce pollution throughout the globe. So we believe that you guys should station this branch's headquarters in GE to be an environmental beacon to the world. By doing this, you're essentially able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone by solving the economic issues in Pittsfield, and the stagnation that's been happening, as well as the environmental ones. Furthermore, you guys will be able to test the products you guys will be developing since there's already pollution in the area. So that's another positive that you guys will be able to have through moving there. As Graydon previously mentioned too, Pittsfield is equidistant from Boston, so you're able to cater to both markets without having the high cost of rent or infrastructure in Boston itself, or in New York itself. Furthermore, we're not asking you guys to move so far away that you lose the educated workforce up in New England. You would still be able to acquire great minds from great schools that would help you guys achieve your mission and achieve what you guys really want to. So as you guys have kind of seen through our entire presentation, we want to bring this whole thing full circle. So in the beginning, it wasn't too great. We had complications together, and the cleanup process wasn't fantastic. But we want to bring you guys back. We want to offer a chance for you guys to come back and restore what you guys, the problems that GE has caused in our community. And on to some intended results. By doing this, we do expect large economic growth. By bringing this branch back to Pittsfield, we expect a large spike in jobs, a plethora of high-wage jobs that could really spark the economy, get us back to where we were in the 70s and 80s. Furthermore, the 52 acres of old factory buildings would either be replaced or destroyed. So they have been these eyesores have been a legit problem in Pittsfield for a long period of time due to the notorious use for being hotspots for drug deals as well as other criminal activity. Also, too, like Noah previously stated, the poorest part of Pittsfield revolved around this area. Also, we do expect over time the entire Housatonic River pollution issue to be solved completely if this branch is moved back and focuses on creating products to help reduce pollution in Pittsfield as well as throughout the globe. We don't know exactly how long this will take, but we do think that bringing this branch back and mending our relationship is definitely a step in the right direction. Also, this is great for you guys too because it kind of restores your global reputation. It's a great way for you guys to market since we don't quite believe that GE has a great reputation. And this is a great way also to have potential to increase your stock price and invest in a great town like Pittsfield. On to some financial impacts. Since you guys don't have the necessary infrastructure or equipment or people already in Pittsfield, it would require an initial amount of capital to kind of get back into Pittsfield and get the branch together. So you guys also could save money by relocating. So as I previously stated, we would be willing to offer you guys tax breaks as well as the rent would not be as high throughout the area. And although costly, the long-term benefits are large. So as Graydon previously stated, investing in Pittsfield is sort of investing in the future. So your performance has not been fantastic as of late, but this is definitely a way to spark the interest in people of GE and kind of tell consumers and tell businesses, hey, we're open for business and we really want to like push this on you guys, and we're ready to go. So thank you very much.
So, okay. First question, does GE own the land still that's from which these 52 acres, does GE still own this land?
No, sir, they do not.
Okay.
Yeah, they sold a couple of the divisions, the plastic divisions, to another local company called IBECC. However, currently as of this year too, IBECC has decided to leave Pittsfield as well, leaving even more buildings in disarray.
Okay. And of the in the research phase of their solution that you're proposing, part of it includes, did I understand correctly, an assessment of what the extent of the current pollution status is?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. And there have been previous impact assessments of what, in the past, possibly in the late 70s or 80s at some point, that pollution assessment. There have been previous pollution assessments.
Yes, sir, that's correct. I think Chris mentioned a little bit before some of the tests that were done throughout the river to show like the amount of pollution that was in the fish and in the soil, and how many like pounds of PCBs were actually in the Housatonic River.
Okay. And are there other models of companies that have operated industrial sites, had occasion for legacy pollution release into rivers or aquifers or other types of environments where there have been similar type cleanup efforts or possibly similar considerations in the past?
Oh, definitely. If you look at BP with the BP oil spill and how they've handled cleaning up that mess, and now their image is, I would argue, much better than it was back in the day because they actually claimed responsibility for the issue and helped clean it up.
Okay. Okay, so the BP example. How about in the context of rather than something in the ocean, something in a river or a floodplain, as you mentioned, this situation here? Are there other examples like that? Has GE done anything like this before, cleaned up, or returned to what had otherwise been a legacy site to facilitate a cleanup or dedicated resources to do so?
We don't believe so, no, sir. We don't have any type of evidence to say that they have done anything like this before.
We know that they did leave Connecticut. Their headquarters was moved from Connecticut to Boston, however, so there's been no return to Connecticut as far as I know.
There were also trace amounts of PCBs found like 140 miles downriver in Connecticut as well. So it wasn't just that Pittsfield was affected. Pittsfield was affected the most, but it also traced all the way down, I think about 100 miles of the river.
Around 40, right?
Yeah.
And so the problem's not really contained, so it's going to keep spreading if we don't contain it in Pittsfield. Because that's where the worst of the area happened before the factory. The plastics division was right on the riverfront in Pittsfield.
Basically, we believe that this would start a positive trend in the right direction, and other companies would possibly follow suit if this shows financial gain in the future.
Yeah, GE could be a leader instead of a follower in this case.
Okay.
I have an ethical question, really around why would GE need to prioritize Pittsfield over another community or other communities that might have an equal claim? Our stock price is down 77%. We're getting pounded. Where our resources, our business model is being severely challenged. So even if this is a compelling argument, the argument will come from many places, and we've got limited resources in being able to respond. So why Pittsfield?
So we feel as though Pittsfield is the perfect spot to start the restoration process because, as we've stated before, 140 miles downriver of Pittsfield has been affected directly from the plants that were stationed in Pittsfield. Therefore, if you contain the problem in Pittsfield, you should lessen the problem in other places, and then you should open a door to go back and clean up there too.
Well, we're already remediating and involved in remediation efforts. I'm asking the question around the investment that you're asking us to make in your community, and why, in the expanded business presence of your community, and why your community. Why does your community have an ethical claim that would be a greater ethical claim than other communities that might come to us with the same proposition?
I would say that we have developed such a great relationship, or we had such a great relationship with you guys, that I would argue other towns or other places might not have had. So because you guys employed about a fourth of our workforce, and our local economy and the town's economy really evolved around GE. We were so invested in your corporation, and you guys kind of turned that on us and didn't really treat us with the same amount of respect. So I think that's like why we would say starting there is a great spot because of the history that we have.
There was one time in the city where Pittsfield and GE were synonymous, in fact, and that people wouldn't be talking about like what the government was doing, what the city government was doing. They'd be talking about GE was doing because GE even almost masked the influence of the local council.
Also, as we mentioned before, there's highly educated people here, and it's reduced cost from Boston, and it's equidistant from New York City and Boston as well. So you save money on your rent, and we have highly educated people here as well.
So those are business justifications or benefits, and the value issue that you've identified as one of respect and lack of respect and the opportunity to restore respect.
Yes.
You mentioned the issue of moving. We don't argue for a moment that PCBs are bad. And the issue we have is we want to isolate those to 3 locations in the greater Pittsfield area. And you're suggesting that we find another location. And if we were to do that, wouldn't we just be taking that problem and giving it to someone else?
See, the issue is the EPA is the one who demanded that GE transport them out of state, and the EPA already has zones where they've already quarantined off, and they've said are waste disposal sites, quote unquote, and GE's proposal in the appeal is to create 3 new ones in Pittsfield instead of simply transporting material out of state to 3 already established functioning waste disposal plants. So it wouldn't be creating anything new outside of state.
Also, too, they're not like EPA certified, these new 3 waste dumps. So like you would be actually shipping it to a spot where the EPA can handle it, not just dumping them somewhere and just saying, oh, let's just kind of get rid of this problem.
Well, that's not saying they couldn't be certified, and you spoke earlier of creating goodwill and respect for one another, and we're suggesting that perhaps by allowing us to set these sites up, these 3 sites within the area that we have identified, and get, that's not to say that the EPA couldn't sign off on them. That might, you talk about respect.
And I understand that, and I
that
think
might be a good way to start.
I think if we start having this conversation about working towards some sort of solution and bringing this branch back, I think my fellow councilman and the mayor would also be willing to find some sort of compromise. So we totally understand that like we're asking a decent amount from your corporation, but at the end of the day, we do think that this is a legitimate problem that should be solved, and we'd be willing to work with you guys on some of the intricacies of how everything's going to work out. But we just want to start having the conversation instead of being kind of turned off.
Yeah, and working back to the ethical part too. If you look at Pittsfield prior to GE's departure and currently, it's like a completely different place. There's no flourishing business. There's no really high investment in anything, and it was mostly because of GE and the taxes, obviously, that GE paid into the city for having the property there. That really was able to keep Pittsfield's infrastructure high and well maintained.
Often when we consider different options, there's always what we refer to as the do-nothing option, okay? So what if we do nothing? And effectively, if I follow, aside from the cleanup commitment and resources we've committed today, going forward, that option would be to do nothing. If we do nothing, beyond effectively perpetuating or leaving intact the legacy of the environmental damage, what other consequences would there be for GE?
So as we kind of talked about before, like it's going to keep getting worse because it's going to keep going downstream. So like Noah kind of previously stated, you have to concentrate it there, or else you're going to have a bigger problem on your hand because you're going to have polluted all the way down through Connecticut. You're going to have to solve a lot more problems than just as much in Pittsfield, because we have, like Chris stated, like really, really, really high levels of, I think, 8 times more in fish than what is legally acceptable. So you're going to have that problem throughout the entire river.
Yeah, and once one city, so a city of 40,000 people might not seem like a big, significant number when you think about how many people live in America alone. However, if you think about the families that live along the river and the children that play in the rivers and the children that literally houses live right on top of the river, basically, we feel as though there's definitely a high moral ground that GE can take in trying to prevent these children from becoming harmed.
Also, too, if you guys do nothing, I think that you won't be able to have the opportunity to kind of use this as a marketing play and say, hey, we are like we're trying to clean up this area. We're trying to restore image. We're investing in a community that we once had and that we once held. So this is not just for us. This is also for you guys as well, so that you guys can build a better customer rapport, better relationship with other businesses. And so that's why we don't think it's just for us. And if you guys do nothing, maybe the opportunity to make money in the future is going to pass you by.
Yeah, not only is doing nothing unethical, but as Graydon showed with the stock price, continuing to do nothing hasn't been doing well for GE so far. So we see this as an opportunity for GE to improve financially long term, but also improve their public image as well in terms of the ethics behind the situation.
GE clearly needs a change in the mode of how they're operating, and we feel as though by relocating to Pittsfield, it would stir up old memories of success for the company back in their heyday in the 80s.
Okay, so a couple things. Just, so I'm a chemical engineer. I'm very familiar with polychlorinated biphenyls and what they can do. So it's always challenging to talk to someone where you really don't know what their background is like. They're about as, PCBs are about as nasty an environmental issue as there exists. For me, what I perceive is really the major issue here is this is effectively a time bomb waiting to go off for GE. So GE has a legacy, and it's clearly identifiable in terms of cause-effect relationship between GE's business and operations historically in the area. It's a public relations disaster waiting to happen. And this is true of a lot of the sites, similar to this one around the U.S. Of course, political administrations and public perception come and go. But this is an enormous legacy issue for GE to try to solve. When you and the environment is much like any other chemical system. Over time, there's sort of a feed and bleed behavior where the levels of contamination in the environment will eventually dissipate. But just like nuclear disposal sites, it takes a profoundly long time. Okay, and there's unfounded or undetermined risks and related issues that will just perpetuate over time. A couple things. When you talk with the boards really work together with the decision makers for the company. So boards rarely make decisions of this kind, but it's extremely important to influence them because they in turn will influence those who make decisions, although they rarely make these types of decisions necessarily unilaterally or on their own. And it sounds like GE has a body of resources to deploy. They have to choose about where they're going to deploy these resources in the context of this versus perhaps other examples or other legacy sites that require cleanup. So I thought you guys did a good job of helping us understand what the background was, and in particular providing sufficient balance of explaining what the impact without getting too bogged down or trying to explain what PCBs are and why they are. That would have been a nightmare to go into that area. The other thing is the ethical piece. I think you guys did a good job of distinguishing. You have a relationship with this area. It could be a part of a future relationship, and most importantly, you have a responsibility for your past operations in the area. And I think that was helpful to sort of think in that context as well. The financial piece is for me. I defer to these gents too as well what their thoughts are. I think the financial piece is really tough to apply to this case because GE is such an enormous company that even any single operation within some part of their business is going to have very little impact. There are a number of different things that impact GE's stock price. It's a very complicated type of equation, and it's very difficult for one vendor decision to make much of a difference on stock price. One thing I think that you guys touched on, there was an opportunity to spend more focus, was what is the future vision that we're going to try to achieve here? So in the big flick, okay, we're trying to avoid a huge risk of a potential public relations disaster in terms of GE being associated with what's gone on here and being blamed in perception. And there are many examples of companies that have had that type of phenomenon occur. W.R. Grace endured one actually in Massachusetts as well several years ago. That was related to another similar but somewhat different situation. That would be the downside. The upside is, and you guys touched on this throughout, was, GE in terms of a partner in the community or a long-term relationship with the community and a commitment and taking responsibility, and that reflects on GE's culture, their values, and so forth. I think there was probably more that you could probably do in that way, because without some sort of legal compelling reason for GE to do what they need to do, it ultimately comes down to, is there a compelling vision, is there a compelling perspective of risk management, or is there some compelling element to what GE wants to do in the future in the area? Okay.
I would say that, I would agree. I would say that GE is in a state of flux now. They've moved to Boston. They have a number of business lines, and they're trying to figure out what kind of company are they, what should go, what should stay. But I would think that the eco-imagination could be huge, because it's a hot button issue today, and it may be that you might have thought about taking this and saying GE cures all, or we cure the world. Well, guess what? We're going to start with the Housatonic River, and we're going to come up with the technology to do this. We're going to do the right thing by the community, and we're going to build a business model with this that we can take to other places. I thought that to go that route might have added some value.
I think you did. I'm from Southern California. I don't know your area. I really don't know the geography or the specific issues that you've described, so you did a good job kind of introducing me to that. I asked a couple of questions related to ethics. You had on one of your slides that dumping is obviously unethical, and I wondered when you had that, why is it obviously unethical? Why is it unethical? I thought it would have been strengthened to explore that. One way you could have done that, I asked what the ethical value was, and you had focused on the issue of respect. Really, what you have is the externalizing of cost into the community and internalizing of profit. So there is a fundamental inequity in the relationship between GE and your community, and you borne the burden of that. And yet you have been deeply committed to GE historically, and you want that partnership really fundamentally to be right-sized around that previous inequity. I think there was an opportunity to develop some of the language along those lines that would have strengthened your argument. And then the other thing that, what I heard you describe was basically that there's a profound need in Pittsfield, which means I couldn't quite match that with the capacity that you could bring to strengthen GE. So I kept thinking, you've got a declining employment base. You're situated between two metropolitan areas, but all the employees are in those metropolitan areas. That's where all of the energy is going. And so I couldn't figure out how expensive it would be to try to get employees, and really what kind of values do you bring on that basis to the proposal. And so that was what I could have, from my standpoint, could have strengthened some of the financial presentation. So in any event, but it was a good presentation, and really well presented in terms of linking both the environmental issue and the community relationship and responsibility issue.
One of the things you guys touched on a couple times was disposal locally versus an EPA established site. And my understanding or takeaway was that the motive for doing that was it's much less expensive as opposed to transporting it to what otherwise would be a distant location. And consequently, more efficient use of resources if that would be a feasible option. Obviously, GE cannot make that decision, although what you're trying to motivate GE to do is influence and turn government bodies who possibly could allow that type of decision. So that part, although you guys touched on it, it could have been a little clearer about why you wanted to do that and what the trade-offs or considerations were. Okay, and again, boards will usually make a decision yes, no. They won't get into the details or micromanage is the word. They won't really say, do it this way, do it that way, or so forth. They'll simply say, yes, do it, no, don't do it. That's really about the extent of what the boards will often do when decisions are brought to them. Or they'll be given choices, A, B, C, or D, and you make a choice A, B, C, or D. The other thing is, when you talk with boards, first of all, don't call them you guys, okay? That's, and even though we will talk amongst ourselves that way, a board environment is a very formal, defined environment. And consequently, the sort of role-playing situation here is not necessarily all that different from the way boards operate. But just be aware when in that formal environment, present formally, talk formally, and that will that's an opportunity for you guys to be a little stronger that way. But I thought, in terms of the way you took on roles and communicated, that was you're mostly the way there. It was good, and I like that you guys knew your stuff. You knew it was on your slides. I didn't see you reading off what was on the page. I saw you glance once or twice. Those sort of things actually make a far better difference. I learned in business school when we do presentations, we're having a conversation. I'm not here to talk about my presentation. I'm here to have a conversation, and you guys did a good job conveying it.
I would agree. I was impressed. In essence, you're from Holy Cross. You're asking the board to be men and women for others.
Yeah. Excellent.
And since I'm from Loyola Marymount, it's nice to hear that too.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.